Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze. Welcome to this Friday edition. Glad that you are with us. Well, we had the State of the Union yesterday, and it went about as well as you expected. We speculated a little bit yesterday exactly how that was all going to go down. I also got a question from someone yesterday about the new covenant, and it's a very, very good question, and I'm going to answer that. I'll remind you, I will take your questions. If you have any that you would like me to answer, whether they are biblical, theological, if it involves politics, fill in the blank. I'll take your questions because I love to hear your thoughts and want to discuss those matters, maybe help you along the way, or at least clarify my position on these things. And so we had the State of the Union. Biden gets up there, he makes it through, didn't look great. I kind of predicted that. I said don't expect him to, look like a spring chicken, but he didn't completely fall flat on his face, and for Biden that is certainly a victory. Joining us on YouTube, we have Scott, glad to have you. Good morning. We have Susan from Iowa. Kristen, great to have you on. Carol, good to see you. Ken says, salutations, dividers. Ken on the road, still over in Arkansas, I believe. And we have Nancy, good morning, great to have you on. Toby, good morning, good to see you. Those of you who are on Worshipify, thank you for joining us as well. Now, do we have anybody on YouTube who has the Worshipify username or handle, which is TNJ? Because if that is one of you that's on YouTube right now, I'm going to answer your question, but the username on Worshipify that posted the question about the new covenant, their name was TNJ. And so I was just going to let you know in case you're watching, or maybe you know who that is. So you can let them know, hey, the preacher boy is going to take your question and he's going to try to answer it. So a few things about the State of the Union. Biden was kind of malicious. I think that is the big takeaway. He was not Mr. Kind Old Man, Grandpa Joe, which is what he ran on in 2020. If you remember, he very much was the nice old gentleman, the nice old statesman, which Joe Biden has never been nice. He has kind of always been old. And he has been a swamp creature for quite some time now. And he tried to in this round, this year's State of the Union address, go after anybody who doesn't support abortion up to the point of birth, who doesn't want open borders, who doesn't like the fact that the country is sending billions and billions and billions of dollars to other nations with no end in sight. And so if you had issue with any of those policies, then you are immediately a MAGA extremist. And that's one of the big things about Joe Biden that is very off-putting, I think, to a lot of people, is Biden absolutely wants to attack the average everyday person. Now, give me just a moment. I'm going to give you this screen right here, and I am going to put on the mic charger for just a moment, as it was flashing red at me. And there we go. Now we should be in good shape as we have the mic on. One of these days I'm going to have people for that. And I can already hear Dr. White, who may be watching, say, don't tell them what you're doing. Just say, please give me just a moment. But I like to be honest and open with you. Anyways, now, the entire speech, like I said, was very malicious. He does not like you. And that's the big difference between Biden versus Trump. Whenever Trump talks about somebody that he doesn't like, it's other politicians, it's the media, it's the elite, it's the George Soroses of the world, fill in the blank. Whenever Biden talks about people he doesn't like, whenever he attacks somebody, he attacks mothers and fathers that live in Ohio who don't want pornography in their schools. And that's who Biden attacks, and it's really ugly. It's really, really ugly. People don't like it. It looks so bad for the president, and the State of the Union is such a ridiculous event. The way that he walks in and the fanfare. Of course, this is true for both sides. You know, whenever Trump gets elected in 2024, is that a prediction or is it just a hypothetical? I don't know. You decide. The Republicans will probably act the same way. Stop it. Stop it. George Washington gave a letter to Congress. It wasn't supposed to be this big, ridiculous event whenever we treat the president like an emperor, some kind of monarch. It's a ridiculous thing. But Biden walks into the fanfare of all the Democrats jumping up and down, hooping and hollering, kissing the ring, wanting to get all the attention and acknowledgement. And he had nothing. He had nothing. He attacked Republicans and conservatives because we don't think it's a good idea to murder babies. But other than that, Biden had nothing going for him. And he really just did the same old, same old. It's so tiresome. Each and every political event that he does, he's going to talk about the same old things. He runs out there, brags about the, tax cuts to the middle class and the need to increase taxes on the rich, and he brags about the jobs that he's created and all of this. In reality, so much of it is still just on the rebound from COVID. And that's really a lot of what Biden's record is. You take away the rebound from COVID, Biden has very little to stand on. He ignored all the big issues that people actually care about right now, which is serious matters concerning how expensive everything is. Biden wants to keep talking about inflation, and saying inflation is, we've decreased inflation, the inflation rate, not inflation itself. And people don't care about that. What they see is how expensive things are. That's really what matters. You can talk about whatever statistics, whatever data that you want. People go to the grocery store and they know that they're paying more. They go to the gas pump, they know that they're paying more. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think that the State of the Union did anything for Biden. I think for one, because nobody watches, nobody cares. And I was not really watching it. I watched it a little bit, but honestly, it makes me want to go to sleep. I was down at the barn last night. I have a weight room set up down there, and that's whenever I listened. I did not sit down in front of the TV and tune in the State of the Union. I was listening to it passively, hearing what he had to say, and just most people don't care. And so it's not going to do him any good. It is not going to be the reason why Biden surges in the polls if he does. It's going to take something else. The State of the Union also won't be the reason why Trump wins either. I don't think that there's anything that Biden could have done, unless Biden would have passed out, fallen on the ground, maybe had a really bad freeze-up moment, sort of like how Mitch McConnell did. There was nothing about the State of the Union that was going to really hurt him or help him. It just is what it is. It's baked into the cake. Nobody really cares. And it's going to come down to what happens over the next several months. If some big controversy, civil unrest happens that could potentially help Biden, then maybe his polls will get better. Could Trump do something really dumb? I don't know. I mean, Trump's famous for saying he could shoot a guy in broad daylight at Fifth Avenue and nobody would care. He wouldn't lose a vote. There's some truth to that. Trump is Trump. The votes he has are the ones that he's going to get. I really don't know if there's going to be anything that could sway independents away from him, but we'll see. I don't know. Things could change, but at the end of the day, Biden just did his same old tired things. He talked about abortion, and so that's their big platform. The Democratic platform is, we want to kill babies, we want the open border, and we hate you if you disagree with us. It's such an elitist thing, looking down on the everyday man, and I don't think that people like that. So there is a chance that there were some people that saw it and didn't appreciate the way Biden conducted himself. Can we all agree that the State of the Union's dumb and that we need to disband it and completely get rid of it? We have Robert on. Robert said, I like the rebuttal better than the State of the Union speech. It brought me back from the bizarro world. I didn't get to watch the rebuttal, but yeah, I'm sure it would have been much better. Kristen says, I can only manage about 5 minutes of it and got so angry you had to turn it off. That's why I wasn't glued to it. I had it going on the speaker while I was doing things, and I wasn't just watching it the whole time, but every time I did watch it, I did like the parts of Mike Johnson, the new speaker, not the old speaker. And Mike Johnson, he was pretty entertaining, just sitting there listening to the ridiculousness. Susan, I need to get caught up on Randy's Thursday night Bible study. I did not watch it. I listened to a little bit of it, but my my show today, I knew I was going to be talking about the State of the Union, so I owed it to you. As much as I would have rather watched Randy's Bible study, I went ahead and listened to the State of the Union. That way I could give you my thoughts. It's just the same old, same old. If you didn't watch it, it's just the run-of-the-mill, we got to tax the billionaires, and we got to cut spending, and we've got to cut taxes on the middle class to increase spending for certain, Medicare, fill in the blank. We got to cut the expenses of the pharmaceutical companies. It was just the same old ranting and raving that people do not really care about. At this point, the only people that are going to vote for the Democrats are the diehard leftists who believe in the ideology, who hate Trump, and there's an old term called a yellow dog Democrat, that older generation that just votes Democrat because they were told to all their life and they don't look at the facts. That frustrates me. That wasn't going to be on the topic of my show, but it bothers me so much. I know so many people who, they are conservatives. They are for marriage between one man and one woman. They do not support the redefinition of marriage. Furthermore, they don't support abortion. Yet, what do? They always vote Democrat because under a Republican, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's what they were told all their lives. I don't care what the letter is in front of the name. Do you support killing babies? That's what really matters. And I'll admit it, Trump isn't near as conservative on abortion as I'd like him to be. I wish he had much more of Ron DeSantis' policy. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the guy that aligns most closely to my values. Scott said, I tried to listen in hopes of seeing him mess up. Couldn't take the evil oozing from his every pore. You know that they had him on so much stuff to keep him going. He was talking fast. He was talking suspiciously fast. If you were a high school teacher in a speech class, you would have corrected him and said, now listen, Joe, whenever you're giving a speech, you don't need to run through your words so quickly. You need to give yourself some time to articulate everything, make sure everybody is able to hear you plainly, because speaking fast over a microphone into a large room of an audience makes it not as easy to follow. So they would have corrected him in a regular high school speech class. They had him on something that had him very much amped up. And one of the things that was interesting was whenever the conservatives, the Republicans, were talking about Laken Riley, and they were calling on Biden to say her name, it threw Biden off the teleprompter, and what lights were on in that house went gone. I mean, he just went the classic, once he gets done with his speeches, and he just turns and he doesn't know where to go. It was like you reset his button. Like you just press reset and he just and held up the pen that had her name on it, and it's bad. It's so bad. And if he would have tried to have done that speech without a teleprompter, we'd have seen just how bad it was. And even with the teleprompter, he slurred a lot of his words. He didn't get a lot of things right. You can tell he's not there. And there's so many people saying, we need an age limit. We can't have a president in their 80s. I don't care. They just have to be able to have the cognitive capacity to carry out the responsibilities of the job. I'm fine with having an older president. I know a lot of people my age think we need a younger person. No, with age comes wisdom. So we just got to have somebody who can cognitively do it. And Biden cannot cognitively do it. Nancy said you missed both. You watched Cancer Secrets. I do not know what Cancer Secrets is, Nancy. Sounds way more interesting than the State of the Union. Jerry says the Republican response to Sicko Joe was weak at best. See, I didn't watch it. I don't know. I don't know. We got to hit him hard. You got to hit him. Give it to him. Take it to him. Don't pull any punches now. Hey, we've got 1984. I don't know if you want me to use your name on there, your undercover secret name. But he says, Friday, I am watching live this morning. The rehash of the State of the Union by Tucker was, in my opinion, the best one of all the commentators. I wish I had some stuff that O'Biden was on. I'm telling you, they definitely had him on something. You can tell because you'll have two different people. everyday Biden sitting over there, hey, what's up, kids, licking his ice cream cone is not the Biden that they had on last night. And he probably used Hunter's stash. Nancy now. Yeah, he probably did. And including the official rebuttal. The response just wasn't, I mean, I don't know, I didn't watch it, but leave it to Republicans to never put the nail in the coffin. We always approach it just soft enough. And I, say we, just in the sense of how the Republicans handle things. Toby says, sorry, you had zero interest in watching. And that's fine. That's fine. And here's the thing. I don't expect you to watch it because I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. But you would probably like at least a little bit of an idea of like, hey, what's going on in the world? And so I'm the sacrifice for you to get it done. 1984 is in Oklahoma, and that's right, he is. That is absolutely right. I know who he is. Kristen says Tucker's discussion on it was excellent. I need to probably subscribe to Tucker. 1984 has told me this before. He says I need to get it done. Right now, between following some of the others and studying on my own and all that, I got to work in the time. All right, now, all that to say, think about the world we live in. And it just makes me wonder, was Rush Limbaugh a prophet? If you go back and watch some of his old stuff, and I need to watch more, but it's like every single clip I see of Rush Limbaugh, whether he's talking about the militarization of the state, whether he's talking about these massive apartment complexes that have restaurants and all of this all rolled into one, so it's like 15-minute cities to where you don't need a car just to walk everywhere, live like a bunch of bugs in a pod. It seems like he knew it was going on, and it really almost makes me question the silence of God in our dispensation. Joking, but it almost makes you wonder, was Rush Limbaugh somehow a prophet? And it's amazing because he was laughed at and called crazy, and look at where we are now. Everything that he said was absolutely right, which leads us to say the things that we're looking at today, just get ready. The things that they're saying are crazy now, just wait. Maps, minor attracted persons, mainstream in 10 years. We'll see. We will absolutely see. Just wait. Just wait. We went from 1996, Bill Clinton, hey kids, abortion safe, legal, and rare, to now it's abortion on demand, whatever you want, whatever age, doesn't matter. Who knows? Who knows what craziness that's going to happen? We don't want to take your guns. We just want some smart gun laws, common sense gun reform. And pretty soon you won't even be able to have a slingshot. Hang on to your guns. Hang on to them. They'll probably come after you not wanting you to be in the weight room. Just wait. They will get to the point where they don't want you lifting weights because, my goodness, you can't be stronger than a federal agent. If you're stronger than a federal agent, then you might pose a threat. So they will make it to where gyms are only legal for, the government agents so they can be strong and you can be weak. Just get ready. I don't know. There's my crazy prediction. Just you watch. You'll be able to marry your dog in the state of California probably next week. Here's another crazy thing that's going on in the world today. The North Face, that jacket store. Why am I talking about the North Face, a jacket store? Well, it's because they are offering a 20% discount. Yeah, just go to the store, 20% off, and their jackets are not cheap. All you got to do is, go through a re-education camp. Have your mind completely indoctrinated, transformed, broken down, remolded, reshaped. This is actually true. The North Face is offering a 20% discount to customers who take a racial inclusion class. So all you got to do, have a indoctrination, re-education on this matter of inclusion, racial matters. I'm sure it's critical race theory, DEI, and then you get 20% off. And furthermore, if you just take a mark on the back of your hand, then you're able to go in and buy stuff. Or on your forehead. This stuff is all so crazy, but this just goes to show you, it makes you wonder how many people are going to do it. How many customers are they going to really bow down and take this class just to save $1. And it makes you wonder. I would be willing to say probably more than we think. You would probably want to hope that people wouldn't be so easily persuaded, so easily indoctrinated, but you can see people thinking, hey, $20 or 20% off is 20% off, and I guess if it's if it's $100, yeah, $20 is $20. So it just goes to show you, get ready. Get ready. The marriage between commerce, the market, and political ideology is just going to continue to be united to the point where you just got to take that mark. Just have it on the hand, have it on the forehead, and then you can go in and shop at our store. We already saw that in so many ways, though. I mean, I'm not saying that the COVID shot was the mark of the beast, but before COVID came along, it was so difficult for me to picture how in the world are you going to get people to do that? And then COVID came along and people were stacking up in droves to get the shot so they could shop in the stores. This is absolute insanity. Don't buy North Face. Don't do it. And I have a North Face jacket, but I got it a long time ago because it was the popular thing to do. All the cool kids had a North Face jacket. You can get Carhartt. No, wait, you can't. Carhartt wants to push the vax too. What can we buy? Duluth Trading? Is Duluth Trading they're probably not conservative. I tell you what, though, you need to look at some American companies. They're not cheap, but you've got companies like TAD, T-A-D, Titanica. They're more outdoor clothing companies. There are some American companies out there that don't hate you. You just got to be willing to pay the money. So North Face, big shame, very, very bad, no good, don't buy it. I'm not going to burn it, though, because I already paid them. They already got my money. 1984 says, I didn't watch it, just the recap. The attorney going before the Georgia Senate was really good. Fanny's got her fanny in a jam. That's so funny. Isn't it so good how every time they try to go after Trump, they just take themselves down? It is amazing to watch. Susan says, abortion makes my heart hurt. Such precious little souls. That is it. The whole thing about, like, David Platt. David Platt gets, before last election cycle in 2020, he writes his book, Before You Vote. And his whole point is basically vote for Biden, vote for the Democrats. I know that the Democrats want to murder babies. They only just want to rip children out of the womb. But, Republicans are mean because they don't have open borders and they don't want to just give handouts. And it's possible for any Bible believer to support a platform that says it's okay to murder unborn children. That's the only factor you got to look at. Who cares about the border? Who cares about even religious liberty? We're murdering babies. We are no better. Okay? I'm telling you right now. And this is going to be a shock. And if some people heard this, they would think that, they would accuse me of being a racist, whatever. Abortion is a greater atrocity and more evil than slavery. It is. It is a greater evil than slavery. Slavery at least had the idea of, okay, let's let them live, and we'll let them live and we'll give them a place to stay, I guess. The slave quarters may not have been great, but they were at least allowed to live. Under abortion, they are so non-human. See, and then that was the thing, the 3/5 compromise, when they go, oh, that's horrible, that's terrible, they counted as 3/5 of a person. Yeah, sure, they are. They're people made in the image of God. But an unborn child counts as 0/5 of a person. Abortion is the great evil of our country. Plain and simple. That's the way it is. Duluth t-shirts are way better than Carhartt. I need to try out some Duluth shirts. I have some articles of Duluth. I just don't want to tell you what it is. Susan says, I hope North Face loses customers over this. I haven't even shopped at Target for years. I dig in my heels. Yep. Keep the boycott on Target going. Keep it going. We all have a bunch of political prisoners put away on false charges locked up in and around D.C. I know. Are we the bad guys? I talked about that in one of my episodes a few weeks ago. Is America the bad guys? It makes you wonder. Okay, now, we had a question submitted yesterday. Yesterday, I talked about the importance of understanding that we do not live in the New Covenant, the New Testament, that the New Testament is a future event regarding the kingdom, regarding Israel. Now, I had an excellent question from T and J. I'm looking on Worshipify right now, and I don't know that they are on with me. So I don't know who it was that posted this question. So their question, and I'll check and see if anybody here commented. But the question is 2 Corinthians 3:6, Paul's statement about being ministers of the New Testament. What does that mean? Okay, so this is a great question, and it's a fair question. I appreciate this because you have the right, if I'm getting up here and telling you my theology, you have the right to ask me why I hold what I hold, why I believe what I believe. Many theologians and pastors don't want questions, and I think that's a shame. I'm going to take your question. I think that if I'm going to get up here and tell you what I think, I should tell you why I think that. Now, I've told you before, Paul is our apostle. He was the one that received the mystery concerning this dispensation of the grace of God that didn't concern prophecy, not concerning Israel, not concerning the kingdom. It concerns salvation by grace through faith that can be received today. And yet, Paul being our apostle, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. And it's a question that we need to look at. And I'll pull that up for you right now. This is what Paul says. Let me read. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and read that verse for you real quick. Who also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. Okay, what am I going to do with that? Because Paul had supposedly been our apostle, correct? That's what he said. And yet, I just told you that Paul's ministry for us was not concerning the New Covenant, the New Testament. So why does Paul right here, and I still continue to try to figure out how in the world to correct this. I need to ask Nathan how to properly remove the highlight. I figure out how to fix that, because now I've highlighted that and it bothers me, but I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to care. Why does Paul say that he is a minister of the New Testament? This is where I'm going to tell you the answer is not, it's not the cleanest, it's not the prettiest. We want very simple and straightforward answers and theology. And many people who understand that Paul was the one that received the mystery concerning our age of grace, concerning by grace through faith alone, and it was taught to him, revealed to him by Christ after Christ ascended, Christ appeared again to Paul and revealed to him this mystery dispensation. Many people who understand that, which is great, and I'm super proud of them. I'm so thrilled whenever anybody understands the gospel of grace versus the gospel of the kingdom and how to rightly divide the word of truth. However, some of them can be quick to make a mistake, an error. And their error is making a hard line and saying everything that Paul did, everything that Paul wrote was concerning our salvation. I do not think you can do that. I don't think that you are able to make such a baseline, straightforward, hard and fast rule. That when you do that, you are going to create some challenges for yourself in doctrine and theology. And there's some books that are pretty simple. Titus is a really simple book. You wouldn't have to do a whole lot in Titus to discern what is meant for us, what's for Israel. Most of Titus is just very straightforward. The books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians are not straightforward. I would argue that Paul weaves in and out talking about the gospel of the kingdom versus the gospel of grace. And therefore, you are going to see things in 1st and 2nd Corinthians that I would strongly encourage you to not just take and do blanket application to us. And I know that's not an answer that maybe you want, and it's not a clean answer. It kind of makes things a little bit messy, maybe makes things a little bit confusing. What I'm going to tell you is, what are our alternatives? The alternatives are, if we make this directly about us, we have to decide what we're going to do with that New Testament. We're going to have to decide what we're going to do with some things that Paul says. Let's look at some facts on the ground. And I would truly say that 1st and 2nd Corinthians, they are some of the most challenging books to rightly divide. It's maybe my opinion that I would maybe say that 1st and 2nd Corinthians is more difficult than Romans. And I know that most people think that Romans is the most difficult book to rightly divide. Galatians isn't an easy book either. But I think that the toughest may be 1st and 2nd Corinthians. It is not easy. And those who would say it's easy, I would say have not paid close enough attention to 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And like I said, if you want to try to make blanket application in 1st and 2nd Corinthians because you think there's no way that we have to do that much work and there is that much fine, minute detail in the book of 1st and 2nd Corinthians, I think you're going to create some problems for you that you really don't want to do. You're going to have to contend with some things that you don't want if you are going to say everything in 1st and 2nd Corinthians is for us. Scott says, rightly dividing Paul freaked me out just 2 years ago. Dr. White convinced you? Yes, so here's the thing. People who start to understand right division, they get excited because the Bible becomes very simple. Whatever Paul writes, this is for us. Not that we neglect the rest of Scripture. It's important. All of it's important for doctrine, understanding the gospel of the kingdom, understanding the earthly ministry of Christ, understanding what Christ is going to do in the future. All those things are important. But they get very excited because now the Bible has been made very simple, because we don't have to try to make sense of things that seem contradictory. And they just say, okay, yeah, Paul is our apostle. What Paul wrote, that's for us. And when you do that, it's really difficult to accept the idea that we still have some work to do. That you can't just do blanket application with Paul's writings, and you really need to look at Paul as well. And look at areas where Paul himself addressed matters concerning the kingdom versus where he addressed matters of grace. And that can kind of be deflating, because you think, oh, I thought I had it figured out. Now you're telling me I've got to do all this extra work. But I'm telling you, your doctrine and theology will be way more robust. It'll be way more sound if you can go ahead and accept the fact that, yeah, you still got some work to do. There's still some division that we've got to discern even within Paul's letters. And I'm going to show you a few right now. So, first of all, the book of 1 Corinthians, because 2 Corinthians is the same audience, so we need to look at 1 Corinthians to understand the context. And you're going to see a lot of things in 1 Corinthians that leads you to think, this is a Jewish audience that Paul's writing to. Now, I would argue in 1 Corinthians you see our gospel of grace. It's not that you don't see it, but there are indications that make you think, hold on a minute. There is a very Jewish context going on. I would say 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7 is one of our first indicators. So I'm going to have 2 Corinthians 3:5 on the right, and then I'll have 1 Corinthians on the or first, 2 Corinthians on the left, 1 Corinthians on the right. Look at, for example, verse 7 here in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Is sacrificed or is slain. That's extra right there, just to, I believe within the, Biblify may read a little bit different, but this may be that extra clarification for the King James translators that gave you that. But with that, consider that matter. You have some very Jewish words. And obviously you see Passover and you think, yeah, that's Jewish in context, certainly. I cannot highlight that, and I want to highlight these things so bad. So Passover is very Jewish. It's a Jewish practice. The Passover lamb, fill in the blank. Furthermore, it's not just the word Passover here. Think of these matters of leaven. Leaven, unleavened, new lump. These are words, I would argue, that have a serious implication of Judaism, referring to the nation of Israel. And therefore, I would argue that you want to be careful, and you want to be careful to just make an assumption that he's talking about us. And maybe the lump is not the most convincing, but I think the Passover has some serious matter that we need to be discussed. And I call back to the lump because you do have in Romans chapter 11, which has so much of the referencing still to the Jewish people and bringing in the dispensation of grace. Romans chapter 11, verse 16, for if the first lump be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches. And so you have some tie-ins there with the nation of Israel, the idea of the lump and the leaven, the unleavened bread there. So I want to not just brush past that. Furthermore, you also have the Passover. Now, that's not the only case. Don't think that I'm saying that we say that 1 Corinthians is a Jewish audience based upon that alone. I think that if we only had that verse, it wouldn't be enough to convince you. But we also have chapter 6, verse 2 in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2 says, Do ye know not that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world shall be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? So judging the world, once again, this does not really sound like our gospel. Our gospel is not a worldly gospel. Our gospel is not the kingly gospel. This sounds a whole lot more like those who will be resurrected at the first resurrection when Christ establishes the kingdom and they ruled and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Ruled and reigned? Sounds a whole lot like judging the world. Once again, that first resurrection is not our rapture. That's not concerning us. Now you'd have to be a post-tribulationist if you want to try to make that argument. So, once again, very Jewish in its context. Not a statement that really sounds right for us. So what do you do with that? Do you still try to make blanket application and say, yes, we're going to judge the world? Well, hold on now. What's interesting is that a lot of right dividers will hold that we don't even return back to the earth. We'll stay in heaven even during the millennial kingdom. So there won't be a sense of us judging the world. And yet you have that passage to contend with right there. I would argue, therefore, that is a very Jewish context. We also have some other clues. We also have some other indications. If we go to, for example, chapter 1, verse 12. I think this is very convincing. And this may be one of the strongest ones. 1 Corinthians 1:12. Talking about some of the division there, who they followed. Now this I say, that every one of you saith, I am of Paul, and I of Apollos, and I of Cephas, and I of Christ. Cephas, Peter. That's Peter. Peter had a ministry to the Corinthians. They had heard of Peter's message. And this is where, if you don't understand dividing between Peter versus Paul's ministry, they didn't have the same ministry. Peter, even a non-right divider, even a standard evangelical would probably say Sure, yeah, Peter ministered to the Jews, Paul ministered to everybody else, but they preached the same thing. That would be the standard evangelical view, where you and I understand, yes, Peter had a ministry to the Jews, where Paul ministered to the non-Jews, well, everyone, yet they didn't have the same gospel they preached. That's why they don't even read the same in Peter's epistles or letters versus Paul's. Therefore, this Corinthian audience did hear Peter's gospel being preached. Therefore, you would say they must have received him. They must have had a sense of this. Would these have been Jews, if not Jews, at least proselytes? But once again, you have so many subtle references and not so subtle references to them being Jewish. One more for you I'll point out in chapter 7, verse 18. Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not be uncircumcised. You could also read that as any man called being Jew. Let him not become not a Jew. Well, why would that be? If there's nothing about the Jewish people, nothing on the table for them, why would Paul tell them to go ahead and continue on in Judaism? Verse 17, before verse 18, he said, "But as God hath distributed every man, as the Lord hath called everyone, so let him walk. And so ordain I in all churches." I would say that God has called everyone. From right there, called everyone. The Jews have been called as God's holy nation, God's peculiar people, but God's called everybody else as well to be in the body of Christ. And just because they're called doesn't mean that they're going to accept it. But that door's up wide open for everyone. Yet, if that was the case, why would Paul discern between circumcised versus uncircumcised? What if there was still a circumcision ministry, opportunity, offer that was being available? I hold to the overlap that while the gospel of the kingdom was diminishing for the children of Israel, the gospel of grace was increasing, being made available. So there was a time in which they were both being made available. So why not? Why is this not the case? As Paul says, any man being circumcised, let him not become uncircumcised. As any called in uncircumcision, let him not be circumcised. What do you do with that? Are we going to somehow say, I mean, obviously, circumcision isn't something you can undo. But it would be denouncing Judaism. Or the Jewish faith anyways. Why would Paul tell them to hold on to it? Shouldn't they be leaving that? What if what Paul's talking about is a Jewish promise that was still being offered? So as God hath distributed to every man, He's distributed the kingdom offer to the Jews. He's distributed the grace offer to whosoever. Doesn't matter if you're Jewish. Then he goes on and look, it says this. Circumcision is nothing. Okay, wait a minute. If he says circumcision is nothing, why did he say let him not become uncircumcised? It sounds like Paul is contradicting himself here. If you are not discerning in any matter that this is all about us, every single bit of it, we're already confused because Paul said, if you're circumcised, don't become uncircumcised. And yet circumcision is nothing. Maybe what Paul is trying to say is there is a distribution of a gospel, a dispensation that God is dealing with people. The circumcised don't need to abandon it, and the uncircumcised don't need to become circumcised. Don't make an emphasis on it. Circumcision's nothing. If you're uncircumcised, don't worry about it. At the same time, uncircumcision is nothing. If you're a Jew, don't worry about denouncing Judaism. Understand that God's working in both ways. And I know that is very, very different than what you hear preached and what you hear taught. But we're making sense of this. This is a messy verse. No, either way. It's tricky. It's difficult no matter how you preach it. But if you try to preach this without understanding a difference in dispensations or difference between Peter's and Paul's ministry, you're going to be confused. And I know what I'm saying here, you're thinking, oh my goodness, you're saying a lot of stuff there. But if we take it for what it says, look at how he ends verse 19. But the keeping of the commandments of God. Now that's really confusing. So we're supposed to keep the commandments? Now it sounds like we're almost putting ourselves back under a law again. What commandments? Well, maybe the commandments concerning the circumcised, their responsibilities, the Jewish offer, and the commandments given to everybody in general. Be reconciled unto God by grace through faith, not of works. A commandment doesn't necessitate a work. If I command you to do nothing, and you do nothing, did you work? No. You're simply following the commandment. You're obeying it, adhering to it. Obedience is not a work either, even though some may want to confuse it and make it out to be. Let every man, verse 20, abide in the same calling where he was called. If the calling was all the same, why would he say abide in the same one? Jews, if you have received this kingdom offer, understand you don't need to abandon it. Likewise, there's another thing that God's offering. So you don't need to become Jewish if you're not. There's a distribution of a administration given for all. As we read this here, look at some of your comments, and I'm going to get to 2 Corinthians 3:6. Don't get me wrong, I'm just building the case here that there was a Jewish context to the Corinthians. There was a Jewish audience, and you cannot ignore that. I don't think that you're able to deny that. I think it's very clear. Therefore, this is going to matter when we get to 2 Corinthians. Looking at some of your comments here, same thing for me, Scott. Mark is right. This is 1984. Nothing simple about Paul, but there's no substitute for truth that comes from right division. That's right. I mean, we want to make it easy, but there's a danger in oversimplifying things. According to Ussher's dates, Paul went to Corinth 9 years after Acts 13, where he first openly advocates salvation by grace through faith alone. I don't have anything to add to that. I need to study the timelines and get my own thoughts on it. Scott says, becoming uncircumcised is saying leave Judaism, not necessary. Yeah, you don't need to leave Judaism, you don't need to denounce it. I also think, though, there's that sense of there's this Jewish administration, and you don't need to abandon it and leave it. So with that, Corinthians is kind of a messy collection of letters. 1st and 2nd Corinthians both. And Scott says the old question, did Paul, Silas, and Timothy reside in both dispensations? I think you would have to say yes. I think they did. I think that the evidence is there. If you make that hard cut, I know 1 Corinthians sounds kind of messy right now, how I'm explaining it, but I'm telling you, it gets rough, really rough, and creates some theological problems. Think about the ramifications. If we say that everything in that is about us, the new covenant is redefined. At the very best, you have to say, no, there's more than one covenant. So there's the new covenant to the Jews and the new covenant to us. That gets kind of messy, and I don't know if you can make that argument. Because covenant theology, there you go. Now we get to say that we're God's covenant people. And that's really just, this would be the only verse that you could make that argument, I think. Otherwise, you would just completely throw away the new covenant that is prophesied in the Old Testament, spoken of by Jesus, and you'll have to say, nah, the new covenant is just figurative. So now we got to take the Bible and make so much of it figurative. That is not good. Because if you redefine the New Testament, the new covenant, now you're making everything subjective, and there's no concrete meaning. You're also going to have to address a few other things. It's going to really create some interpretation issues when it comes to the matter of the mystery. Because now, if that's the New Testament, well, it was already prophesied of, and Paul called this a mystery. How could it be a mystery if now he's saying we're ministers of the New Testament that was prophesied of, but it was hidden in previous ages, not made known, but is now revealed? Now Paul's contradicting himself. Evangelicals, the standard approach, covenant theologians even would tell you that Paul contradicts himself and that it's okay. We don't think that's okay. Contradictions aren't okay. I don't think that James and Paul contradict each other. in the sense that they are talking about the same thing. No, the reason that there's a contradiction is because they're talking about two completely different matters. So with all of that, T and J, whatever your name is, are you on with us on Worshipify yet? Y'all should be sure to share with them. I hope that they watch this later. He or she. And Scott, you're right. You added after AD 70, there are no longer two dispensations for the Jew. No, absolutely not. Being Jewish today profits you nothing. Correct. There is no kingdom offer today. No more overlap. What do we do with 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6? Even though I wish I could give you the clean, pretty answer, I'm going to have to go with what the textual evidence provides for me. And I would say the textual evidence says Paul spoke about both Jewish kingdom matters, New Covenant, New Testament matters, and he talked about salvation by grace through faith. If we go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, let's just start from the top. Do we begin to commend ourselves, or need we, as some others, epistles of commendation to you the Corinthians, to you at this time? We can say, yes, there's a Jewish audience here. Or letters of commendation from you? Ye are our epistle written in our hearts, known and read of all men. Paul's speaking a little bit figurative here. Paul says we don't need commendation from you, or we don't even need to give it to you. We know that your life, your testimony, God has revealed this offer, whether it be the Jewish kingdom offer, whether it's the mystery offer, you have had faith in it, you've received it. Therefore, that is a testimony, a witness before men. Forasmuch as ye are manifestly declared to be the epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not in tables of stone, but in fleshly tables of the heart. That's interesting there. Not in tables of stone, but in fleshly tables of the heart. Now, we could say, hold on, this sounds a whole lot like New Covenant stuff, New Testament stuff. I will take away their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Therefore, I want to say this is kind of Jewish language too. This is Jeremiah 31:33, Jewish language. Now, can we argue that this could extend to us? You might be able to argue that because he is talking about this figurative term of epistles, letters. Not really the law, but letters, not of stone, not of a tablet, but rather we are living witnesses, living letters of the truth of God. So you're not bound to saying verse 3 has to be about the Jewish people. I would not get in a fist fight with somebody who said, no, this can be regarding all believers, in the context of our dispensation. But you have something there that I would say you don't just want to shut the door on that. Leave room for some Jewish context here. And I think that we're going to see some Jewish context. Verse 4, in such trust have we through Christ to Godward. So we have trust through Christ to Godward. That would be those. That would be the Corinthians. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God. So God brings this sufficiency, who also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament. But look right here. Also, who, can I do this? Can I highlight also? I want to so bad. There we go. Who also, let me put that in green. Who, God, also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament. Wait a minute. Talking about all things that God's done for them. God has given them the gospel of grace. But God has enabled Paul. That's the thing. We need to stop reading us. So here's another one. Let me try to do this. We need to stop reading us. I put that in red or pink or whatever. No, don't just automatically assume us means us. Who is the immediate context? Us, Paul, Timothy. Those that would be in his group. They were ministers of the New Testament. And I know that a lot of right dividers would maybe want to disagree with me on that. But we have also New Testament. also New Testament. And I would argue that this is saying, Paul's saying we had this ministry of the gospel of Christ also, or as well. This is what I present to you by grace through faith alone. However, he has also made us able ministers of the New Testament concerning the Jewish things, which, whenever you go back and look at the things that he references, to the circumcised, don't become uncircumcised. God's called you in that. God's also called every man who is uncircumcised, don't become circumcised. There's these differences in dispensations and matters, and we are able ministers of both. He's made us a minister into the things of Christ concerning the mystery, but also He's made us able ministers concerning the New Testament that God's doing. Paul was in both camps, and I truly believe that, and I think that if you can be willing to do the work to rightly divide Paul, you'll see, yes, there are times whenever Paul talks about Jewish matters, even the New Testament, the New Covenant, as well as our gospel of grace today. And if you can get to that point, you will really do a lot of good for yourself. And it'll make you a better defender of the dispensational change, the mystery right division, and you won't mix up things and you won't confuse law and grace. I really think that'll help. Jay, you were the ones listening. Okay, great. So you were able to listen to it. Says, yes, we are listening. Thank you for addressing our question. Love your broadcast. Hopala's from Lilywop, Washington. Thank you. I appreciate you all so much. Now, it's coffee time. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to talk, ask me some questions, give me your thoughts, questions or concerns, and I'm going to drink this coffee that is still warm, I hope. And I look forward to hearing from you. But I've still got a little bit of time left before I've got to get to work doing some other matters. So feel free. This is your opportunity while I sit here and sip my black coffee to hear your thoughts and get your feedback. And I look forward to that. So fire away. We have people on, people watching. Give me your questions. Give me your thoughts. I'll talk about anything. I'll give you a few extra minutes here on this Friday afternoon. Scott says, more thumbs, more thumbs. Thank you all. Yeah, YouTube, you got to play the game. You got to up that algorithm by liking, commenting, sharing. If you have not watched the previous 2 episodes, if you would like to introduce this daily show to somebody that you know, friends, family, have them start with episodes 40 and 41. I think those 2 would probably be the greatest way to introduce them to what I talk about. I really am passionate about this, and I'll get fired up about a lot of things. So the past 2 episodes have been a little bit more of a softer approach to maybe help some people get on board. It's tough. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. But hopefully we can help people understand good, sound theology. And I appreciate your questions. Be sure to submit them. If you have questions, you can... If you submit them on Worshipify, I'll see them on Worshipify. Also, if you submit them on here, I can save them. You can email me at markdbaze@gmail.com. I'll take questions. I love to answer them, and I'll take anything that you would like me to address, to discuss. I'm excited for this Sunday. This Sunday we are continuing our series on defining the words of Scripture, and we're going to be talking about the meaning of the word church. Obviously, that's a often very misunderstood term. A lot of people are confused. I was talking to a gentleman. He said he was a dispensationalist. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Where do you draw the line?" And he said, I draw the line in somewhere in the New Testament because Jesus talks about church." I'm like, oh goodness, no, you can't just make an assumption that church automatically means our church. There was a church in the wilderness. Doesn't mean that people were saved by grace through faith alone. Thank you, Mom. She said those 2 episodes were both really good. I'm glad you got to watch them. And my parents, I'm so proud of them. My family is kind of making this journey as well, really taking a good, close look at the Bible, striving to be good, solid Bible students, and they are. And they're doing so good. And I appreciate them listening to me and really considering what I've had to say. And they're really coming a long ways. Carol says, "I like you being fired up. It shows you really care about what our Lord has to say." I care. I care. It's what I want to do. You know, this is my dream job. I love getting to do it. This is my favorite thing. I want to do this from now on. I love being able to teach the Bible and hopefully maybe be somewhat of a voice of sound theology. Yeah, my mom will be there. Carol plans on coming. Okay. So Nancy says, I'd like to hear what you have to say about an article Patrick Wood wrote when technocrats sunk their claws into Donald Trump. Nancy, let me write that down really quickly. There we go. I've got it written down. I will read it and I'll take a look at it. Susan asks, how long until you'll be able to broadcast all your services? So Susan, right now we have Sunday school, Sunday morning, Wednesday night, and Sunday night. Out of all those, I only broadcast Sunday morning. The reason being, Sunday morning obviously is in our auditorium, sanctuary, if we want to use that term. And the reason is because that's where all the equipment is. Now, Sunday nights I do my lessons in the sanctuary. I could live stream those. It's kind of hit and miss, but what I have to do at the church is my Wi-Fi doesn't work very good, so I have to use my phone. And I got your message, Nancy. Whoops. You hear Michael Knowles talking right there. So I have to use my phone to provide the service to live stream. Sometimes it's hit and miss. The issue on Wednesday nights is I do it back in a room where I don't have all my equipment and we're kind of cramped. I will eventually work on that. I want to start broadcasting all my services. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but one of these days I will get there. And that is something I do care about. I want to provide you no less than at least 3 teaching broadcasts, not just these. Hopefully I do some teaching on here, but, broadcast in that sense. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you're excited about our sermon on Sunday. If you have not watched our sermon series, you can go to Worshify, and you can find our series right here. Let me show you. Go to See All Teachers, Mark Baze Ministries. And here is our new series that we're doing, Defining the Words of Scripture. And we have done Saved, Kingdom, Gospel, and then this next Sunday we will be covering Church. So I think this will be a great series. It's really helping my church. This is another series that I'm really happy with, was getting to know your Bible. Some of our broadcast quality on these is just not as good. Many of you have probably watched these, and I do apologize for the technology issues there. But we do have it worked out now. Our video quality on these are very good. Our audio quality is much better. I finally figured it out with the help of one Nathan White, who's a genius. The Mystery of Christ is a good series as well. If you haven't watched that, some of the audio there is not very good, but you can hear it. You can listen to it. And let's see here. Scott, I'm trying to get on Randy White's Zoho. I really am. I've been trying to log in. Sorry, you can see my face making a funny expression. Yeah, praying for you to get better internet service. Thank you. We need to get Starlink over there, because this is what I use. Starlink here works really, really good. So I need to get on Zoho. I know some of you have tagged me on stuff or asked me questions. I need to try to get on there. It's not worked for me for whatever reason. Okay, well, I appreciate you all. This has been a great time. Thank you for those on YouTube, those who joined us on Worshify. So thankful for all of you and your support for this ministry, your prayers, and always asking about the family. The kids are doing good. And with that, this has been Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, the fellowship. I'm Pastor Mark Baze. Go to markbazeministries.org to check out our material, our sources to support our ministry. Have a great rest of your Friday. We'll see you back here on Monday. Thank you all very much. $208.